Hello and welcome to another episode of Intersections, Policy, Program, and Practice Exchange. My name is Elisa Gwilliam, and today I have the pleasure to be talking with Andrew O'Grady, Mental Health America, CEO of Duchess, and Dr. Larry Force, Professor of Psychology and Director of the Center for Aging and Disability Policy at Mount St. Mary College. So Andrew, you want to get us started?
Yeah, I just want to say that I was very excited yesterday, and I called Larry and left him a message, and I should have called you, Elisa, but it was pretty exciting that I mean, it felt good. I got a phone call. I picked up my phone here at work, and it was a young lady from Independent Living, which is an organization a couple counties away from us, and she was just going on and on about, I can't believe you answered the phone. And I just want you to know that I've watched every one of your Intersections episodes. And she was referring to season 1 and season 2 and episode this. And I was like, wow, somebody's listening. And so she uses it with all her clients. And she wanted clarification on, because I think she writes a little something about it. She wanted clarification on the last name of one of our guests. And she was commenting on how we've had guests from Australia and Ireland and California and all over the place. And it was really nice to know that somebody is out there really, listening to this. And I mean, I've heard feedback from people in my organization, but it's nice to hear it from somebody else, because I think these discussions, these informal discussions, can really be useful. I mean, it's almost like going to a 12-step programs are really useful because you hear people's story, and that's a powerful thing. And that's what we're doing here. We're just talking about, whether we're talking about policy and how that's going to change, or whether we're talking about somebody in recovery and they tell their story, or how business is being done in different parts of the country or the world in treating addiction and mental health disorder. And so it's really a great conversation, and it was really good feedback, and it really validated that this is a nice platform we have, and easy to listen to, and hopefully people are taking something from it. So I want to introduce Dr. Larry Force, my one of my partners in this process, and I've known him forever, and he's a professor at Mount St. Mary College, and not forever, he was an old man teacher when I was a young student in college, but no, just kidding. He was probably, he seemed a little older, but he was probably only, 5 years older than me.
How would you know? You only came to 2 classes over the whole semester.
I was busy doing sports and socializing, Anyway, thank you.
Well, thank you. And Andrew, thank you. And I was really glad you contacted me last night. There's a variety. My name is Dr. Larry Force, and as Andrew said, I'm a professor of psychology at Mount St. Mary College. And I run with my friend Jeff Kahana, the Center on Aging and Disability Policy. When Andrew called me last night, what a great, feeling to be acknowledged for the stuff that we're doing, collaboratively. As I tell people in my life, there's different types of currency, and not all currency is green. And when somebody calls you and to acknowledge that they really appreciate what you're doing and that it matters and it's impacting them, what a feeling, what a great feeling. So thank you for sharing that. And as Andrew said, international. We started off locally, then we went statewide, then we went nationally, then we went international. We've had guests from Ireland, we've had guests from Australia. And today we're so proud and pleased to have Breezy Noland with us. And Breezy is in California. And I'm a big believer, as I've said ad nauseum, in the power of connections. And I use LinkedIn a lot. And I connected with Breezy through LinkedIn. And we have been, that this is important to all of us, Breezy and Alyssa and Andrew and myself, because we've been doing this volleyball thing back and forth for months now to make sure that we could arrange for everybody be here. And we're so glad that you're here. And I said to Breezy that I would give her the overview, based upon the professional profile, and then I would ask her talk specifically about how she arrived here, in life, and in this area of addictions and recovery. But Breezy Noland is the CEO at Taste Recovery, and it's out there in Los Angeles, California. You and I spoke on the phone one time. You told me some of your personal history. And what I'd like you to be able to do now is, on behalf of Alyssa, Andrew, and myself, to welcome you and ask you if you could provide us with an overview of how you arrived here today. So please.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. So how I got here. I am 5.5 years sober. Um, I was addicted to alcohol. I never tried any other drug. Once I found alcohol, that was kind of it for me. I immediately fell in love, and it made me feel whole. And I didn't think that I wanted to risk the effects that alcohol had on me with mixing it with anything else. And so for that, I kind of found myself lucky. Um, and I had a lot of downs in 2015. I had a lot of trauma happen to me due to alcohol and situations that I placed myself in. And um, November, I decided to reach out to a counselor that I knew, and I told her that I was trying to kill myself. Um, and that I was just done. I didn't want to live, but I didn't want to die. I didn't know what to do anymore. And she recommended some trauma based rehabs out in Arizona. And I actually I went on to Google and I found this place, and it was in the forest of Florida. And I was like, that's where I want to go. That looks like somewhere I could really just, kind of break down and let my walls down for once. Um, and so I went there November 10th, 2015. That's my sobriety date. Um, when I went there, I had no idea that I wanted to be sober. I thought it was just if I just figured out all of the trauma and all of these issues in my life, then maybe I could drink normally. And they told me, don't book a return flight home. You're probably going to end up staying longer, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, no, you don't understand. I'm not an alcoholic. I just want to stop, being suicidal. And, I just want my PTSD to go away. And I'm going to be home before Christmas. Like I'm booking my flight home. And, lo and behold, of course, I don't make it back on my return flight. I ended up staying for 90 days. And I went to a sober living after that. And that's kind of the beginning part of why I started Taste Recovery. Um, I went to a sober living in St. Petersburg, Florida, and the treatment center I went to, they did not recommend this place. I found it on my own, and I saw pictures and it looked really nice, and they had full size beds rather than twins. And I was like, I don't really want to go to a place where I have to stay in a twin size bed again. So I went there, and a lot of the women from treatment followed me. And it ended up being, not necessarily a flop house, but, it was not at all what, they portrayed themselves as. The owner, he lived in a different state, and he would come down once a month to kind of like check on us. And uh, the house manager, there was three house managers, but there was only one that actually lived on site. And pretty quickly we realized she was not sober. And she was driving us around in the druggy buggy, romping curves and nodding out. And, it got really, really scary. Um, and you know we would call the owner, we would tell the owner what was going on. He didn't believe us, he didn't seem to care. And then that you know trickled down to the rest of the women in the sober living. And before we knew it, a lot of the women were using. Nobody was getting kicked out because we had something on the house manager. It was one of those things where it was, and I was just sitting there like, what do I do? But luckily, before all of that happened, I really got myself into AA out in St. Petersburg. I found a phenomenal group of women that just kind of, grabbed me and they were like, okay, you're going to this meeting with us this day, and this meeting with us this day, and this meeting with us this day. And none of the other women in my sober living wanted to do that. So I think that's why I was able to stay sober in such a chaotic sober living environment. So it is possible, but it wasn't easy. I ended up staying for about 3 months before I finally found another sober living back home in California.
With a twin bed.
Yeah. Yep. At that point, I was like, I don't care. I just want a good house. Like, when I first got sober, like I said, I didn't even know I wanted to be sober. And then when I finally, um, was faced with all of that fear of like, wow, I'm really close to relapsing. Like it hit me how badly I wanted to be sober. And so when I finally decided to move back home to California, I had a list this long of questions I needed to ask the sober living owner. I wanted to know about the house manager. I wanted to know how long she had sober. I wanted to know about the women in the house. Is she picky about who she lets in? All sorts of things. And um, that helped me so much. I landed in the best sober living. The house owner, the house manager, everything, like they were phenomenal, and they deeply, deeply cared about us. I ended up staying in that house for 9 months, I believe. I had about 13 months sober when I finally left sober living. And those two completely polar opposite experiences kind of showed me, one, that there's not enough information out there about sober living houses, um, and two, how incredibly important it is to find a good house. The women in that second sober living I'm still friends with today. We all are still sober today. It's just a testament. Like it just shows you when you're at a good house and you're surrounded with that community of people that are all sober, that kind of pick you up and help you on the right path. Like it really does work. And so that's really where I started Taste Recovery, was because so Taste Recovery is a sober living directory platform. It is nationwide. We help people. It's just a listing site, but we give so much more information than any other listing site out there. We give house rules, house requirements, house details. There's an about section, which, I always encourage the owner to kind of tell how they got started, or, give more information about the house manager, give more information about the women in the house or the men in the house, whatever it is, and make people feel why they're doing it. So that way, um, it becomes important, and it helps people really decipher, is this the right fit for me? Because I think that also is why there's such a high turnover rate in sober livings. People don't know what they're getting themselves into. They have no idea about, all of the rules that they're getting themselves into. And that's what's so cool about Taste Recovery, is you go onto the sober living page and you can see, okay, this is my curfew. Am I really going to want to do that? Am I really going to want to be on restriction for the first 30 days? You know what I mean? Like, and if they're agreeing to it up front, the chances are pretty high that they're going to actually, do that.
So
Whereas
let me ask you something. When I went on the LinkedIn site, I noticed that the banner at the top of your LinkedIn site says list your house on the #1 free sober living search app. So that's Taste Recovery. So
yes.
the fact is that people would be able to go on that app, and you'll be able to give, how would people access that app right now?
So the app is available on Apple and Android. And then we also have a website. It's the same thing. But I encourage people to use the app, because if you you can message the houses yourself, and you can start talking to them if you have any other questions. And you get notifications on your phone when they respond. So you can have a conversation on your phone wherever you're at. And, I think that's also really important because if you're looking for a sober living to move into that day, you want to have the answer and be able to move in that day because, more often than not, people don't get, they'll get these lists of sober living. It'll say the sober living house and then the number. And they get a list and they go down the list. They pick up the phone, they start
So
calling.
let me ask you this. So based upon your own experience, you noticed that there was a gap in service and you created Taste Recovery to fill that gap.
Yes.
That's great.
That is great. And I'm gonna make sure that we have sober living. We have 3 community residences and we have apartments, but the community residence related to your situation, 9 months to a year, people stay. We have a 24-bed women house, a 24-bed men house, and a 12-bed male female. And I absolutely want to talk to you after this and get our places on there. And
awesome.
well, without question, I mean, that's fantastic. And you know what's interesting about your story is that when you were looking for, granted, the double bed didn't exactly, that sold it for you. Maybe that wasn't the best reason, but you did research. You researched where you wanted to go. You said, this Arizona thing's okay, but let me research and find. You're a researcher. You look, you check things out before you take a step. And what a perfect app for you to design and make, because that's right up your alley.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah,
let me ask you, when you went into treatment, when you went into that rehab in Florida, were friends and family surprised that you were going into treatment, or everybody was like applauding it?
It was kind of half and half. I had, like I shared a little bit, there was the trauma there, but I'm also that Dr. Jekyll and Hyde. I was really good at presenting myself as I'm fine, everything's fine, everything's fine. And then in front of my family, and then, I lived this double life where then all of a sudden it was just off to the races. I moved a lot. I wanted to constantly keep people guessing, what I was doing, what I was up to. Nobody ever really knew what was going on with me. But when I finally got sober, I think that's when people were like, "Oh, wow, yeah, you're different." Like, I didn't realize how miserable you were before, and how much of a light has come back on since getting sober. And I remember, like I said, I went to a trauma treatment center, and this friend of mine, she told me, "You were the most emotionally unavailable person I had ever met." Which I was just like, I was so surprised. I thought I was so good at pretending that nobody really saw through all of that, but she was like, "No, you were, you tried really hard to pretend like everything was fine, but like you were so emotionally unavailable that it was like I couldn't wait to see the progress that would happen with you," and that was only through sobriety and AA that I actually started getting connected with my emotions again. I had just turned them completely off, and it was either everything's fine or like I'm blacked out and gone.
So let me ask you this. One of the things that we talked about before we came on to the video cast is our philosophy about, one entrance into the system, not, one for mental health, not one for addictions. So Alyssa has a picture that she'd be able to, at this point, if she could bring that up. And this is a picture of a local psychiatric center. So a year ago, 2 years ago now, coming down a local main fair in our county, I see this building. And I had worked for the state for years in systems like this, on institutional grounds. So I turn around, I take the picture because it was so, telling. They're knocking down the main building of the psych center. And then here's the tagline: mental health at its best, tearing down the walls. Andrew is a and I'm not just saying this because he's on the video, he's a big deal, big voice in our local arena and statewide regarding mental health services. And the fact is that he's a big proponent of no need for two separate doors. So he has a picture that he's introduced, and maybe Alyssa can bring that up, and Andrew can give you some history of it. But you talk about trauma. So at some point, what was going on was identified as trauma. Thank God that somebody was able to also blend in recovery and addiction issues and not just treat you for a mental health issue.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise you would have still been out there dancing, maybe not only drinking, but dancing with a lot of different types of psychotropics as they're trying to get a hold of the mental health issue, when really the foundation of some of the problem was the substance use. Right. So Andrew, maybe you could talk about this bell.
Well, this is just a bell that was forged by the founder of MHAs throughout the country. There's 235 MHAs, I believe, and there's one in Los Angeles and other places in California. But he was inpatient psychiatric. He was a doctor. He couldn't get out when he wanted to get out. This was early 1900s, but it was terrible treatment. I mean, people were hosed down, chained and shackled to the walls, and it was just bad. I saw a documentary recently about how that whole thing worked and how they basically sterilized women, and it was just a mess. They used these people as guinea pigs for research and all sorts of other things. Anyway, he called for all the chains and shackles to be sent to him because he wanted to get rid of that and move the needle to away from that inhumanity. And anyway, he actually took chains and shackles that were sent from various psychiatric institutions throughout the country and forged this bell, and that's kind of the symbol of the MHA movement. But I'm curious because we've had people on here who have talked about their addiction came as a result of trauma, and then we've had people, and you're kind of indicating that your addiction may have led to trauma in some ways, or been involved in putting you in a position that led to trauma. I'm wondering. See, everybody comes from it from a different angle, and like Larry said, the wrong door is where you make a phone call. I need some help with trauma, and they're like, okay, well, what's going on? Well, I have this symptom, this symptom, this symptom. I can't sleep. Okay, do you drink? Yeah, I drink. Now, granted, in your case, you were probably drinking quite a bit. Okay, mm-hmm. But in some cases, yeah, I drink every night. I have a drink to help me to sleep because I take a pill and I take a drink and it shuts my mind off and I go to sleep. But trauma is the main thing. But now all of a sudden they're forced to go to an addiction treatment center where they're not going to even touch your trauma or issues. They're going to focus you on stop drinking. That's not the way you go about this. Right. I'm hoping that in your first go around in this place in Florida, that they did tend to the trauma as well. I mean, I don't know. Some places just focus on the sobriety only and leave it all aside. And yeah, we got to get to a place where we're really focusing on the whole person and dealing with, all of it, not just one or the other.
Yeah, I had a little bit of trauma. My mother's been married 8 times. So, I think that's where the emotionally unavailable thing started from. My parents got divorced when I was like 2 or 3. And so, through the trauma treatment, I realized, that was, a big deal for me. It was constantly chaos in my family.
A lot of abandonment too. I mean, you're trying to
absolutely.
make a relationship with a male figure in your life, and then they're gone.
Yeah, and my mom had that. I don't want to self-diagnose her, but it kind of felt like the ambivalent love addict, where she would try so hard to get them to fall in love with her, and then once they did, they'd get married right away, and then she'd be like, okay, I'm gone. And so I always grew up thinking like, I never want to be like that. I'm just going to avoid emotions at all costs. I'm never going to love anybody. I'm never going to get married. I'm never going to have children, and that was the story I told myself for a very, very long time, to where I didn't even have a relationship until I got sober. And so, Yeah, I definitely had I definitely had issues prior to starting to drink, and I think that definitely helped. The alcohol helped all of those things, and that's probably why I started drinking in the first place. And then obviously the alcohol led to more traumatic things happening, um and I went to such a phenomenal treatment center. I know for a fact that I wouldn't be sober today had I not gone, somewhere like that where they treated both symptoms. And they gave us two highly trained trauma therapists. And we had groups, and I was surrounded by people who understood. And we all had something happen to us, and I haven't met a single person in AA who hasn't had some sort of traumatic experience happen to them. Um, so like you were just saying, like it absolutely should be both. It should be dealing with both of the issues because I mean, I have sponsees, I have, all of these people in my life who share really deep, dark things with me. And I'm sitting there like, why is no one helping them with this? Like, no wonder you can't stay sober. No wonder you've been in and out of treatment for 10 years. Nobody's actually getting to the root cause. So, yeah, I hear you on that for sure.
There's I haven't shared this on here, but it's an interesting story. So when I first, now granted, this is going back 25 years, but things didn't really change that drastically until maybe if it even has changed 10 years ago, 7 years ago. But I worked in a clinic in Beacon, New York, and there was a hallway, and the hallway held Astor Children's Services. You had therapists for kids, you had a therapist in the mental health clinic, and then you had three therapists that worked in the alcohol and substance abuse clinic. We're all in one hallway. And the alcohol and substance abuse clinic and the mental health clinic were run by the county, who was my employer. And I'm working with these people, and I do an intake on somebody on a Tuesday, right? And they come in and I talk to them and I determine that because this is the training and this is what you're supposed to do and this is the procedure and this is what the state tells you have to do. I determine that their primary diagnosis is addiction. So they're going to have to see somebody in alcohol substance abuse clinic because I'm not an expert in that. It really you should be dealing with an expert focused on that. Well, I switched jobs because I wanted to experience another thing. So like I switched over to the alcohol and substance abuse clinic. And like on Wednesday, I'm now the expert in alcohol and substance abuse. It was just ridiculous. I mean, it's just so, the whole system is messed up. I mean, all clinicians should be trained in trauma, since we now find that 80% of people dealing with addiction or mental health issues have some trauma in their life.
Mhm.
And, addiction and mental health issues. We should all be duly trained in all of those so we can address issues for people and not have people go through it. It's hard enough to get help. It's hard enough to call for help. It's hard enough to figure out who to call for help. It's hard enough to get an appointment once you do that. And then
Right.
to walk in a door after like 4 weeks of trying and find out, oh, you got to go in this door over here, not this door. This isn't going to fit for you. Then you got to do it all over again. It's just, we need to have, there needs to be better access, easy access. Your app is phenomenal. It helps people get to that point. We need more apps like that. We need more apps that get people to care immediately, the right amount of care. And you're a great guest on here. You're pretty
Absolutely.
great. Yeah.
And let me build upon that. I mean, our audience, our network, policymakers, program developers, practitioners, but the most important part of our audience are people that are coming into sobriety.
Right.
Take us back to those early days. What would you had hoped that somebody had said to you, or what did somebody say to you that made sense? Because now you're here. Now you're 5 years in. Okay, you've established a foundation. You've established a network, a presence. You're an influencer in the field of addiction and recovery. What is it that you can say to somebody that's sitting on the couch saying, I'm 24 hours sober. This is the fourth time I've been in these settings. My family I've burnt out. My friends I've burnt out. I've said this, both to Andrew and to Alyssa, that I know somebody that is now 20 years sober, but they went to I think 15 rehabs. But let's not forget, along the way, they're blowing systems up. Their families are leaving them, the whole bit. So what would you say, or what was said to you that just made sense to that person that's sitting there watching this?
Um, honestly, so I went to treatment prior to actually going to the second treatment center, and I had someone straight up just tell me, I think you're an alcoholic. And I said, I think you're crazy. I wish someone had explained it to me earlier, that you don't, because people's vision of what an alcoholic is the people, living in tents, drinking out of brown bags, shooting up heroin, whatever it may be, living on the streets. They don't see, the full picture of what an alcoholic could be. And I wish, instead of that person just telling me, hey, I think you're an alcoholic, I wish they would have explained it to me. Because immediately I just shut down and said, I just cut her out. I just immediately stopped listening. Um, and I could have saved myself, 3 years of, you know, destruction in my life, had that person just come to me and said, hey, you know, um, it sounds to me like you are relying on alcohol, that, and just the fact that alcoholism is the ism. Um it's just the symptom of what's going on in your brain. You really are trying to numb all of your feelings. You are trying to um, not feel anything anymore because you've gone through all of this stuff. And, I wish someone would have just explained the disease to me prior to, my dad's in a different 12-step program. And even then, I still didn't have the definition of what an alcoholic was, or the ism, or any of that. I had no idea. And once I had the knowledge from the second treatment center, I was like, oh, now it makes sense. I don't have to be the person who wakes up every single day and is drinking straight away. I don't have to be, the person that has gone to jail 15 times to be an alcoholic. I had an issue with alcohol. I was blacking out every single time I drank. Was I drinking every day? No. But does that mean that I have um a very big issue with alcohol? Yes. And had I known that 3 years prior, it probably wouldn't have gotten to that extent of where now I am drinking all the time. I'm taking Dramamine so that I don't throw up, so that I can keep drinking, and, and ruining more and more relationships. Like, I just wish I had the knowledge prior to my disease getting worse and worse and worse, to where it was harder to stop. I think that is um, kind of where our industry is messing up. We're not getting the information to people before they are, almost too far gone. And that's what I really wanted to do with Taste Recovery, is like, I want to build a brand behind the name, and like be like, hey, you can go to sober living even if you're not an alcoholic. Like, if you think you have an issue with alcohol or drugs, like, maybe you can just go try to be sober and see if this is something that you want to do, because maybe that's where everything's going wrong. Like, we're not trying to help people before they're lost, before they're too far gone, before their bodies are, you know, where they're having to detox for 2 weeks off of whatever. You know what I mean? So
Well, let me ask you this. Are you reframing this? Because this is an interesting discussion. So you came to a sober living environment after you went through a rehab.
yes.
But in your world, could you actually see people going directly into a sober living environment just to see how it works for them? Or is it always after rehab?
So uh Taste Recovery it's for anybody. You know what I mean? Anybody can go on and find it. But I'm saying, I think I would really like our branding to be more towards people who are, we're trying to educate people, and we're trying to help people understand the ism, and we're trying to, most people have no idea what a sober living even is until they've met treatment or detox, and then they hear about it there. And I think that's an issue. I think people should be educated on all of this and know that there are options. Like, had I gone to a sober living 3 years prior to getting sober, would I have more time? I don't know. But, I think my issue was, my surroundings, my environment, the people I hung out with, all of these things, and I think before it got so bad, I could have met the right people. I could have started going to meetings earlier. I could have learned what it all was, and I could have saved myself 3 years of misery.
And can I say something to you? What a powerful, powerful message.
Yeah.
Person that's sitting on the couch or the person that's standing in the hallway. As Andrew said, you have been a tremendous, tremendous guest.
Thank you.
Because of your message, your voice, your brand.
You validate, we've tried for years to lobby New York State, and we finally succeeded, our MHA chapter in New York State, to mandate education about mental health and addiction into health classes at every level of school.
Oh,
Schools don't
wow.
like being mandated, but to have the conversations you wish somebody had with you as a kid, so you actually became an adult understanding all these things,
Right.
would have made it maybe a difference to you. Understanding what all the signs are that you're drinking too much. What's
Right.
more than moderation? What are the warning signs? That if that's all, look what we've done with smoking. I know we have to stop in a second, but look what we've done for smoking. I mean, I remember somebody, I don't know if somebody offered me a cigarette or something. My kid was like, 13 years old. Oh my God, you're going to die from one cigarette. I mean, they just brainwashed you thinking that was going to do it. But look at so few people smoke now compared to what it used to be. So anyway, that kind of education in the early ages, you just testified to why that would be important. So it's fantastic to have you on here.
Thank you.
And please don't feel as though this is the last time we're going to talk.
No, you and I are going to talk because I want our agency to be on your app. So.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So at this point, Alyssa, could we turn it back to you?
Absolutely. Well, Breezy, thank you so much for being our guest today. And thank you for joining us. You've been listening to Intersections Policy, Program, and Practice Exchange. If you'd like to rewatch this episode, leave a comment, or share it with friends, you can do so by logging on to our website, www.intersections-exchange.com.
And how about, is there a possibility, Breezy, that you could provide people with information about how to contact you directly, or your brand?
Yeah, absolutely. So Taste Recovery has the website, tasterecovery.com. We have a Facebook page, Facebook group. I have a LinkedIn account, Breezy Nolan, where people contact me there all the time. And then also my email address is Brianna, BRIANNA @tasterecovery.com.
Fantastic. All right, guys, until next